Welcome back. It's time for Josh, Michael, and Kyle to tell us all of the great things about the Legends of Barsaive, including the new one just came out on PDF, right?
That is correct. On Friday, Growth Potential LOB 11 was released to the storefront, thanks in no small part to Josh's hard work on layout
Aw.
and cover. Yeah. So, I'm Kyle, and Michael here is with me, and the two of us have been working on the LOBs for years and years now. And Josh, as you've been doing the layout on all of the LOBs, or did you start on 4 maybe?
I started on like 4 or 5, yeah. I think I did one that already had the cover picked out and then started doing the covers as well.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah.
But I don't remember specifically. I know that Anna did some of them before I took over. I don't remember exactly which ones she did, although I could probably find out if I wanted to.
Fair enough. We also have another lead writer, Carl, who unfortunately is not able to make it today. But so I'm Kyle, and then you just heard from Josh and Michael. If you want to introduce yourself.
Yep. So I'm Michael. I'm one of the lead writers on several of the LOBs. And we, like I said, Kyle, myself, and Carl all come up with the concept for it together. 10 years. 10 years feels. I feel like that's when we started laying the groundwork.
Remember when we had that first meeting and we were like, "Oh, we'll do it in 4 years."
Yeah.
I do remember.
And then you said, "Hey, do you want to write the Elven Nations book?" And then from then things moved.
Slower.
And we asked you if we could take over Haven and do weird stuff with it, and you were like, "I guess." But yeah, so we have had since 10 years ago, we have had a plan to do a set of 16 adventures, and we are getting really close to that because Michael is currently working on the final script for LOB 12, so hopefully that one will be joining the other ones soon. And I already have a plan to playtest 16 at Gen Con, so if you're planning on attending Gen Con, keep your eyes open for the event list.
The
And
end
then
is in sight.
the end is in
Yeah.
sight. And then part 15 will make its debut, unfortunately, next year due to other things.
Other things. But yeah, if anyone has questions about LOBs, I've noticed that the LOB chat on the Discord has been a lot more active. So thanks to everyone who's been answering questions there. I try to pop in when I can. But yeah, LOB 112 is a nice big one coming up. So hopefully all are excited.
I was just checking, and I actually took over the covers starting with number 5, but I didn't start doing the layout until because Anna still did the one for Brain Scratch.
Oh,
So
okay.
I didn't take over layout, I think, until number 9.
Okay. So you still have 3 under your belt then.
Yeah. I mean, I think I sort of helped out with layout as part of the art stuff as well, but
Mhm. So I guess that's a good question that I've always wondered about for art, for the LOBs. If it's not custom art, you usually go back to the old first edition books and find good art reference to that's relevant to what we're talking about. Is there any special way you do that?
no, not really. There is an advantage of having all of the first edition books in PDF, so it's easy for me to pull one up and just kind of scroll page by page. I also have at least a rough idea of what art is sort of in each books. So if, for example, I'm looking, well, I want to do I want to have a picture here that's going to depict like the most recent one, for example, where the main NPC is a female troll wizard, right? I
Mhm.
wanted to find at least one piece that depicted a female troll that hadn't been used before, and and so, obviously looking through Crystal Raiders, looking through Denizens 2, which has the Trolls chapter in it, and looking through some other places, like the old Barsaive box set book, which has a whole bunch of variety of different art in it, and just kind of going through and finding something that seems to make sense. We may need our artists to give us more female trolls because there actually aren't very many.
Yeah.
Just like there actually aren't very many female orcs in the art either.
Mhm.
There's a very, very masculine heavy artwork when it comes to them. More female elves and windlings and humans, but the 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 burlier races are less balanced in terms of their gender presentations.
Yeah, I think we ended up with female orcs and trolls in the LOBs.
Yeah, which is great for representation, but when you're not making fresh art for them, can be somewhat awkward. Uh, Especially with some of the female art from the original first edition, in fact, depicts characters that you are using in already, like Archiana Smoothskin, in fact, has art already existent for her, which was
Yes.
nice. But I've used a lot of art from the par length box.
Mhm. We're lucky that we have great first edition art that exists.
Yes, yes, and lucky that we have electronic copies that I can, screen grab a chunk of art and then do some Photoshop magic on it to like get rid of the text around it and clean up the resolution of the image so that it will actually not look like garbage on the page.
Yeah.
That's the extent of my art magic is photo manipulation. I can't do anything fresh like James, but
You can't whip up an iconic character in just 2 hours?
I cannot whip up an iconic character if you gave me 2 weeks. So I mean, unless you want it to look like sort of like comic comic strip style,
Yeah, there you go.
stylized art. I could do that. I used to do comic strips when I was a kid.
Ooh, that's what we need to get out on the website. Your old comic strips.
Yeah, they were not Earthdawn comic strips.
So, Michael, is there anything that you can share about what's upcoming that you're excited to in people's hands?
Well, getting 112 into people's hands, that one's been play tested quite a few things. So I don't think. Do we want to just say there are spoilers for things that aren't necessarily published in this?
I mean, we don't want to spoil because people will probably want to play.
So let's just say that part 12 has a very climactic end to it.
Yes.
And I would say it was challenging actually going through some of Carl was kind enough to do an editing pass on it. And the subtleties with 12 is like the end is fixed. Like you have to end at the point. There's not a lot of wiggle room due to the other stories that we want to tell in the final four adventures. So that was the first like time when writing an adventure that I had to have like there's a rail and you cannot go past this rail. Whereas previously, there's always a little wiggle room based on player choice. So I did find that challenging to balance the narrative in terms of ending everybody at the same point, which is not something I've had to do before.
Yeah, it's always challenging to create a fun adventure when you know it needs to be A, published, and B, have a sequel. So, like, if you need to end it in a certain spot, you need to make sure that the players are able to impact the story in a way that won't make the sequel not work. Like Prelude
I
to War does a lot of that.
Yeah, there's a lot of cases in Prelude to War where the involved in certain events, and it's written with the idea that they are likely going to have events turn out for the better, but the broader strokes of what's happening, they can't really stop them. The avalanche has started, and it's too late for the pebbles to vote, as the Vorlons said in Babylon 5.
Yes.
I suppose you could say something similar for Part 8, but I think Part 8 has enough choices and free will in it that it's not as railroady. So that's why. So it's challenging to make players feel like they have a choice when sometimes for the narrative they can't have one.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
you add some good choice points into 12, but yeah, it
Yeah.
is there is some parts where it's a challenge for sure.
And ending sort of the first half on Part 8 is rough. I ran the first 8 for a home group, and 8 ends on kind of a downer note.
It is The Empire Strikes Back. It is fully intended to be The Empire Strikes Back.
And like, because I didn't have any of the I think we might have had 9 ready at that point. It was just kind of like, okay, we've been playing for a little bit over a year. This is a good stopping point. But it was kind of like at the end, it's like, oh, but what? Anyway, I did
And
actually.
I know from a player's perspective it hurts, but I will say from a writing perspective, like it's exactly what we want the player to be that in our story.
Yes. Oh, I completely agree. It's just that, sometimes with the reveal there, the players can feel not only frustrated a little bit, but betrayed.
Yeah.
I did have a question for you guys, as kind of going back to what we had initially talked about and some of the stuff that's been in the like introductory text for the various adventures and whatnot. The idea being that the actions and choices of the players over the course of these adventures are kind of shaping the outcome.
Mhm.
How much has the playtesting and events that you have run with the earlier adventures now several years ago gone into informing the status quo of the later adventures as you are concepting them and testing them and writing them up now? So how much did stuff going on in 2, 3, and 4 or 5 come into play when you were working out 11, 12, 13, where we're kind of at that stage of things?
No, you go first, Michael.
So for me, and this ties in directly to Part 12. So there were several story threads in the first 8 adventures, and I'll be honest, for me, specifically in my adventures, like I set stuff up, and I didn't necessarily know where they would go in the future. But for Part 12 and then eventually Part 15, I'm bringing in those threads and having those choices make impactful changes. So for Part 12 specifically, it does kind of become a large like decision tree. Oh, they did this in Part 3 and they did this in Part 7. So what does that mean for this conversation that they're going to have in Part 12? So it does. I have started to inject I would say the first 8 adventures are you make your choices, and then the last 8 adventures for my modules, it's dealing with the consequences in inconvenient ways. So it doesn't matter what choice you necessarily made, that it will have consequences, and that's something I've really wanted to drive home in the later adventures. So those choices that you made early on didn't necessarily have a negative impact to those modules, but they will back in the later half.
You made your bed and now you got to lie in it.
Exactly. And that was something that was very important for me making these connected adventures, was that, giving you can be an asshole, or if we're allowed to say that, but you can be an asshole, but it's gonna have consequences before our story is done.
Yeah, I would say so. I definitely didn't want any of the early adventures. I didn't want to assume that any of the early adventures ended in a certain way for the later adventures, because I wanted it to be open-ended as much as possible, so that any table could run all of the adventures. But through playtesting, I realized more and more just how open-ended different tables can be and how much groups could come to very different conclusions about how they feel about different groups. Like, I have had groups that have been like ride or die for Torgak, or like the exact opposite, like ride or die for the AUE, and like would not hear the other side of the argument. Like, they've just been like somehow had in their head that like Torgak is out there eating babies, or they have it in their head that AUE is just waiting for a chance to pounce and turn everything into a slaving ring. And I'm like, I feel like most of the adventures are built with nuance and the ability to see there's lots of shades of gray in between these two sides, and there's some difficulty here. And there's going to be a cost no matter what you pick. But the fact that a lot of players have very strong opinions about it, I was surprised to see.
So with that in mind, how is that going to inform the writing that is for sort of the official releases that we'll see for those later chapters coming down the road? Are you looking to write the adventures to factor in like both or multiple points of view that you've encountered to try and take those different branching paths into effect? Into account when you're like planning out your outlines?
Do you mean like for the last 5 that we're writing here?
Yeah, because
Mhm.
if you have seen a variety of different ways that the adventures have played out with the different groups that you've run through these multiple times. Now, I know each of you have not run all of them, but the ones that you've been writing, you've run
Mhm.
multiple times, 3, 4, 5, half a dozen times, and seeing the different interactions and results and interpretations that different player groups have of them. Are you looking to structure the later adventures that you're working on now or planning out now to have those different options spelled out for the home GM that may be looking at the whole
Mm.
thing as an overall arc and present both of these and say, hey, if your players went this way, this is how this is probably going to play out. But if they went this
Mhm.
way, then here's the other option that we've seen. Like
Got
how much of the like living campaign aspect of it is
Mhm.
okay, the majority of our player groups made this decision, so we're going to decide that this is what happened, quote unquote, officially,
Right.
and not necessarily provide a whole lot of support for home groups that may have gone in a different direction.
Right.
I don't know if you've thought about that at all, but this is my brain.
Well, no, I think we have discussed that and thought about that a little bit. I think for the most part, we have, by the time we are publishing an adventure, we have like an expected ending, which is generally that the players accomplish the task that they were given to do. And if they had like the opportunity to screw someone over, but it wasn't like a requirement, we usually try to build in if this faction doesn't like this guy, this could happen into the different scenarios. We usually try to make it a little more one size fits all, just because, like for Charcoal Grin, for instance, there's a lot of ways you can get on Charcoal Grin's bad side in the first 8 adventures. And then in the later 8 adventures, it can sort of be, well, if you are on Charcoal Grin's bad side, your life is harder now. And we don't really explore why you are on her list. But um,
Just
I
recognizing that as a possibility.
yeah, and we do. Um, there are some places where I have expanded a little bit further on. If you're running these all at home, obviously you have a lot more freedom than if you're trying to run them as convention, interlinked, living play. It's slightly different. And then once all 16 are done, I do think that there needs to be like a canon way that these things end through like the website that's listed, reading those chapter summaries, going based on our our playtests and figuring out exactly what we feel is happening. I don't know. What do you think, Michael?
Yeah, I agree. And more to Josh's point, so for part 13, it's so part 7 has it's a branched path. You can go left or you can go right, and it basically ends with you either supporting one of two factions. So I pull that forward into part 13, where those factions that were opposed have now come together common goal. So the framing of that adventure is slightly different. Where if you chose to support these people, these are the people you're talking to, and then if you went with option B, then option B are the people who are kind of directing you. But at the same, like Kyle said, we like to keep it open ended. So the the setup for the adventure and the end goal of part 13 is the same, regardless of which faction you've supported in part 7. It's just who wants to talk to you more and who maybe has hurt feelings and might be working against you.
Gotcha.
We're math people, so we flowcharted.
Yeah. Programmers.
And that's really going to come to head. Part 15 will be a complicated web of you did this, you did this, you did this. So these are the people that are willing to help you. These are the people that are not willing to help you. And really, that's the my end goal is always to have those consequences come in part 15, where it's a part where the players really need help and they have to live in their bed they made.
Cash in those chips.
So we've got a question in the chat from Syzygy. Knowing that kind of layout might be helpful for GMs running it, which I agree with. Will there be a 16 adventure layout for each season? That's a big question. Where the first half introduces the challenges, objectives, and the last half sorting out the choices. Will there be other areas that might be explored? So a question I think we've gotten in the past about future Legends videos.
And we've discussed this a little bit. I think that the main thing that we want to make sure we do is stick the landing with these 16.
Yeah.
But I think we don't want to lock ourselves into this framework, and I think that a portion of our community has probably been a little disappointed that it has taken so long for this story to complete. So if I had to guess, I would think that the next story that might bear the Legends name would be smaller in scope and probably be somewhere else. It probably would not be a direct sequel to this, just because the complexity of that would be like each time you make another adventure where you need to kind of flowchart stuff, it like doubles the complexity. What do you think, Michael?
Yeah, I think the future of the Legend of Barsaive series, part 16. I think a clean slate is the best way to start. And I think we've learned a lot about the living campaign type of setting. Like when we started out, we had some examples from living campaign styles in other games, but I mean, to be honest, I would frame a lot of stuff differently what I know now versus what we knew 10 years ago again.
Right.
So it's there are things that we thought would work well and people don't even interact with. I don't even think we imagined it would be a big hit or work well, and then we had a lot of positive player response to. So I think it's an ever evolving thing where you've made this is season 1 and chunk 1, and then moving forward it would be different, but ultimately I think it would be a better product.
So to answer Syzygy's question more succinctly, other areas would be explored, but probably not in a 16-part series.
Yeah. And one other thing to kind of go along with that, like the 16 parts, that was with 3 primary writers. And I think when we were originally outlining what we wanted in a living campaign, the 3 of us came up with 3 separate kind of lanes. And I don't know if it came through. I hope it comes through. But each of the adventures series that each of us wrote were kind of following a specific thread through Haven. Kyle kind of had politics. I was at the map pieces, and then the kind of the stuff that was going on behind the scenes with the things that I don't necessarily want to say out loud. And that those we kind of put them together. We interconnected them. Like my series is 6 to 8 adventures, not the full 16. So we weren't following all threads and all adventures. So I think in the future we'd like to compact those into smaller series, so you don't have to pull the full 16. You could do a version of 4 adventures, get a smaller finish.
Yeah.
Another question, because you had mentioned sort of when all is said and done and we've got the final parts out officially, of deciding in-house what the canon for the purposes of our future development results are going to be, and who's where and what's going on, of looking at the results of the Gen Con games, but also the summaries that get sent in. How many of those have you actually been getting outside of the games that you've been running?
I don't have the password to that, so I think that's in our web guru's hands. So I have not reviewed that yet. So that's probably I got to get that password from Brad.
That's a true statement.
It's a secret lockbox.
I was curious because I think it's an interesting idea, and one that I know has been tried with other games before. Like the original edition of Torg did something kind of similar with that, where they tried to have the results of games that people reported to them shape what was going to happen in the future development of the setting. And I'm just curious how effective, like you've got the number of people that purchase the product, then the number of them that actually play it, and then the number of them that actually go to the
report
length
back.
of reporting and following up.
Yeah, I definitely would be open to talking about it as we're wrapping up and looking into what we decide occurs, because there is some big stuff we have planned for the end of this that we've been building towards, and we want to make sure that people are happy with the direction that goes, and we wanted to give the community a chance to influence that. But then also at the same time, we didn't want to fall into the trap that other living campaigns have fallen into. Like I think it was Legends of the Five Rings had it set up where whoever won the card tournament got to pick something that happened in the setting, and there was just no vetting for it. So it was like, what if Dog was emperor now? And it was like, well, we're gonna have a group come to consensus, and then we'll decide what happens from there. So yeah, we're trying to pick from a list of options, something fun to happen. But then also there's kind of a free form place to put what has happened to you during your chapter summary. So I'm very interested to see what comes back.
One thing I want to mention here, because we've been talking about it in house, and I think this may be a good time to mention it. When 12 comes out, the plan is to actually put together 9, 10, 11, and 12 into a book to release as the volume 2 of the Haven campaign, rather than waiting to get all of the second half done. So we're probably going to be looking at 3-book collection for that rather than 2. We don't have an exact timeline on that, obviously, because we're waiting on 12, but that is the plan.
Right, because 9, 10, 11, and 12 don't have a physical release, right?
Correct.
And so by bundling them all up, people who are physical only will have the ability to have them.
Yep. And we'll have to talk when we get closer to that about what maybe kind of extra little bit we can include in there.
Yeah, I did really like that for LOBs 1 through 8, since we had learned so much from our first, I think it had been 6 or 7 years at that time. We were able to go back and fix up that free Haven guidebook that we have on our storefront, get that cleaned up, and then with everything else, along with, I think, Josh, you put in a bunch of like the Parlink thread items are in there as well.
Yeah, it took a little bit of space. We put a couple of those in there. We also put Masks of Fear, the adventure that's in the quick start, in there because that is kind of an introduction. While it doesn't tie directly into the events that are going on, some of the NPCs are introduced for the first time in that. And so that's a nice little bit as well. And just looking at what kind of potential value add that physical copy might provide, so that if people got the individuals that they came digitally, obviously the physical is good enough on its own, but also maybe to have something extra in there.
For sure. I would be interested for anyone who is wants to provide some feedback. Is there anyone who is there any of the adventuring companies that people have found particularly interesting, or any of the characters that have been particularly interesting to any of our players, or particularly not interesting? As a writer slash GM of the setting, it's kind of difficult to understand how people are interacting with the stuff once it leaves your sphere of influence.
Yeah, we want to find out who everybody hates so that we can write them in more prominently.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like more Jar Jar Binks, if you say so.
Looking back at past adventures that you guys, past sessions of the earlier chapters that you've run at Gen Con and other places, is there anything that comes to mind that you found particularly surprising in terms of an event or outcome within one of the adventures that you didn't really foresee?
I think Kyle has one, definitely.
I have one.
Oh, the people's attachment to little orphans.
Oh yeah. So this isn't really a spoiler, and it's for a really early one. So in LOB 102, they go to an almshouse, and I needed to come up with a cast of characters to be at an almshouse. And they were supposed to be like a little bit of a social hurdle, but not a large one, just like a little bit of an interesting social interaction to have early on. So one of the characters that I added was like a blind orphan girl that was supposed to have the information, but also be timid, and a character that like everyone at the almshouse kind of would watch out for, but she wouldn't really be interested in interacting with strangers. But all of the player characters who see that there is a little girl at the almshouse, immediately like want to like protect her and like make her their mascot, and she becomes their everything. And like it is adorable, but I did not fully prepare for that interaction. I had like 2 sentences, I think, about her, and I was like, oh, she doesn't really want to leave with you. And they're like, we have hundreds of silver, and we want to give her a stay at the inn, and we want to make her life great. And I'm like, I don't think that this is okay. But it's they only have the best intentions.
Well,
Yeah,
What about what about you, Michael? Didn't you have a bunch of issues with people interacting with like the Seekers of the Heart?
Yeah, that was so part 7 again. They go to the fringes of Bloodwood, and they start interacting with Blood Elves and the Seekers of the Heart. And I think originally it was framed as they are terrorists and you don't want to interact with them. And then I had a table like really dig into their backstory, and it was one of those things that I wasn't necessarily prepared for. There's a big branch in that adventure that originally was not was not part of the adventure. You know, you can either support the Blood Elves or you can support the Seekers, and that whole branching dialogue and end fully came out of the playtesting. You spend a lot more time in Care Eidolon with the setup than I had originally intended in LOB7.
Because you gave the Seekers a lot more reason for people to potentially empathize with the Seekers, since this one playtest group really got on their side, right?
Yeah. And I said, and since then running it, like it's like either people are, I just want to get through this as quickly as possible and go the quick route, quote unquote, and then the people of I am lawful and just, and this doesn't feel right to me. I want to dig into the details. So it's interesting to see the certain people are just want to blow through certain aspects, and other people really do care about what's going on in the world.
What about Josh? Did anything unusual come when you were running them as like a home game?
Not really in any of the original ones so much. Last month I ran. Oh, I don't remember the name of it now. For our local con, I've got to go back and look up which one it is. I think it was 9. Hold on.
Games of the Hungry?
No, 9 is Twiceborn.
Games of the Hungry is 5.
No, it's not 10. It's obviously not. Oh, maybe it's earlier than I thought.
Actually, while Josh is looking that up, the original playtest for Part 9 at Gen Con went a little sideways on you too, Kyle. No small part on me.
Which one?
Part 9, I feel there was like the evil people, and they were supposed to be like a starving family that were evil, but we didn't know it. I think I shot them in the first 5 minutes of talking to them.
Yeah. In the very beginning, there is a group of people that like you're told that they're criminals, and then you go and meet them, and they're pretending to not be criminals but are criminals. And you were like, I will have none of this. You are criminals, and you are poor, and being poor is a crime, and you shot them. And everyone was like, okay, I guess we're gonna kill all these people. And I was like, wow. Right.
My offense, it was Sunday morning. I was sleepy.
Yeah, I think you were a little hungover and missed the setup.
It was 106. It was Glass Houses.
Okay.
And the one of the players in the group that I was running it for was very fixed on the didn't really care so much about the plight of the folks out in the wilderness. And we're just like, well, they sent us out to get the stuff back, so let's get the stuff back and get back to the city, and not really caring about what sort of the story that you are supposed to uncover and dig into and find out that things are not as clear cut as they are presented to you at first.
Gotcha. So they got to the village and the trapped people, and they were like, hell no.
Well, it was more like, we don't sorry about your problems, but I don't particularly care.
Your problems are just that, your problems.
Yeah. They sent us here to get this stuff, and the ambush didn't work, and we kind of beat those people up, and we're just gonna take the stuff. And the player was cool with then, the storm blows in and kind of prevents them from leaving. But also wasn't particularly interested in interacting and finding out the complexities of things.
Sure.
Yeah. That's one of the challenges, especially in the second half of the story, is getting buy-in from new players is a careful balance. We want to pay off things that have happened, in the first 8 adventures and during the setup, but we still want this to be approachable by new people, and especially again we're several years into the story, so people coming in with fresh eyes and maybe they haven't had a chance to play the first 8 adventures, we still want them to show up and play. So framing things in a way of these people have played earlier than for this reason, but giving buy-in for new players, other than just a paycheck, has been a challenge. But it's been an interesting way to. You still need to frame things in a certain way to gauge player interest when they don't necessarily have something on the line yet.
Yeah. Michael and I even went to like a whole con where we were like, let's try to just play in a bunch of really weird living campaign games and see how they go. And like so many of them are like these ongoing campaigns we'd never heard of that were like 20 years deep, and we were like, what the hell is happening? And like they were like fun and weird, but we were like, we have no reason to care about any of this stuff. Let's try to make sure that doesn't happen.
W. Socrates brought up in the chat that he's about to start that which was lost. So far, the group has been more about trying to get themselves set up. It could be not running them back to back and putting more individualized things for the PCs. I think that is fantastic. If you're running the home game, is to pepper the ongoing story of what's happening in the Legends of Barsaive arcs with fleshing it out with your own character's goals and motivations and customizing it, especially as the story goes on, to things that are important to them. And that's something that's tough to write into when you're looking for, when from a production standpoint, you're looking to do something that is a bit more generic that anybody would have reason to get involved with and things like that.
Yeah, I think that's I think we've been like between adventures is somewhere between like 6 weeks to 2 months, like between adventures. So there's certainly space for home campaigns to go out and tell other stories, draw in more customizable content. And I think that's what makes Earthdawn an interesting RPG, is that those personal connections really drive a lot of the things in the narratives.
Yeah, like we try to kind of mimic it with the thread items that we specifically made for the LOBs, but the custom character-driven nature of Earthdawn stories is, I think, one of the main strengths of the system, which is a difficult thing to get across in a published, long ongoing published work.
Yeah.
So Josh, as someone who's touched a lot of LOB projects, is there any moment or scene or anything like that you found particularly interesting or tickled by?
Well, of the ones released so far, I think my favorite adventure is Games of the Hungry.
Games of the Hungry, interesting. Why would you say that?
Well, mainly because when I ran it for the home game group, one, I love the False Men. I love the False Men battles. I love the War Zone. I think it's a really cool part of Parlength broadly. But the fascination that had these basically like robot wars, because they kept referring to them as robots. And the ability for my inner ham to come out when portraying these, like, on one level, like very simple personalities, was just a lot of fun. I like characters that like are on one sense easy to get a handle on, but that are also like a little bit alien in a sense, that like the motivations of the especially the stonemen and steelmen that are like in charge of these different brigades, are like very simple to understand, but when you get like players coming in expecting there to be some kind of like underlying complexity, it's kind of like they realized that it was kind of like almost trying to Captain Kirk it, where they were trying to trick the computer into like some kind of paradox that would destroy it. Like understanding the simplicity of them and how to manipulate that to what they wanted. They had a lot of fun with it. I had a lot of fun with it. It's such a different type of, like, in some ways it's kind of a typical adventure, but it is so different because of the environment that you come into.
Mhm.
There,
There were so I was the lead writer on Games of the Hungry, and there's two big guiding lights for writing that one. So the first was every 4 adventures we tried to make like a set. So the fourth adventure is always like a big thing. So we wanted the next one to sort of feel like the start of something new. So therefore, the 5th adventure, Games of the Hungry, we wanted it to feel very like standalone, something new, something light, something low stakes. So like Games of the Hungry had the opportunity to be fun and not that big of a deal. So like I really like playing with that idea. And then I also like I really wanted to play with the idea of like, can I make a sandbox adventure that can wrap up in a 4-hour convention time slot? Uh, and it was an interesting challenge to set it up that way. But I have always had fun when I've run it as well, just because I do love the way. I think every player comes into it thinking that there's going to be some deep Machiavellian plan, and no, it's just robots punching robots.
Yeah, it reminds me a little bit of a couple of adventures from the old Parlength Adventures book.
Hmm.
In just in terms of tone, both Desire Box, which basically is a plot revolving around this MacGuffin that whoever gets a hold of it sees how whatever is in the box is going to help their dreams come true, and it like passes through a whole bunch of hands and basically causes all sorts of problems in Haven as different people get it, and like, oh yes, now I'm going to lead a crusade to clear all of the horrors out of the ruins, and oh now I'm going to be in charge of Haven now and overthrow Torgak, and like all of these different things as it's like passing back and forth. And the idea is that like it's kind of serious, but it's also like weird and whimsical and funny. And it's like, hey, give it, like, let one of your player characters get a hold of it for a moment and just tell them that they are convinced that whatever is inside of it will help them achieve whatever goal they have, and other people around them will believe them when they say that that's the case. And then the adventure wraps up with, because it like builds and builds this desire within the community, that ends with Parolles himself showing up and going, oh, that's where I left that, and taking the box, and the effect goes away and he leaves. It's just like this weird kind of like magical bizarrety that overtakes it. And the other one is the one where the cadaver men come and set up the circus in
Okay.
Haven. That part of it is that like one of the group's allies loses a bet at one of the games, and so the cost of losing the bet is that he's getting taken to the kingdom to be converted into a cadaver man.
Hmm.
But it is also like really kind of weird and whimsical and like off-putting and whatnot, because the cadaver kingdom in Parlength is also not what you expect when it comes to like, oh,
Hmm.
there's a kingdom of the undead, there's a kingdom of undead zombies down under the city. Like, they're mostly harmless,
Yeah,
honestly. They're
they're
just
they're weird.
weird.
Yeah. Which is and that's why the 9th adventure is about the kingdom of the undead, because we wanted something a little lighter
Yeah.
after 8.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, there's a kingdom of cadaver men under, and it kind of unsettles everybody, but they're not like out killing everybody unless you intrude into your territory, and then it's understood that you trespassed, and so you got what you deserved. It's like dealing with the unforgivables as well.
Hmm.
Like, there's a lot of just like offbeat weirdness to organizations there that I really like.
Yeah.
Like, the ruins have this reputation as this death trap, and I don't think that's, like, on the one hand I think it's kind of accurate, but on the other hand there's so much more to it than it just being this, big ruin full of traps and deadly monsters.
Yeah. I do kind of like the idea that like um the horrors come and they feed, and it's everybody dies and it's terrible. But then what's left behind is kind of just like this font of chaos in its wake that is just like weird.
Yeah.
Michael, are there any
darkly whimsical?
Yeah. Are there any pieces of par length that you haven't gotten to play with, but that you were quite tickled by when you were flipping through the old resources?
To be honest, no, I really went in all the places I wanted to go. I knew I wanted to go into the vaults and deal with Charcoal Grin, and then like I said a lot of the scenes and came out of like those old par length maps, like the part 4, that which was lost. That a lot of that, there's a scene where they have to go into the twist, and that whole scene came out of old maps I found in the original par length book. And the same with a scene in part 12. There's a part of the vaults that it's sunken, and it's got like this black viscous ooze kind of around it. So a lot of the resources kind of inspired where I wanted players to go, and gave me some really good resources to plop. I love in part 4 there's several opportunities to get different versions of the same map, and those are all assets from the original part length book. And so it's a lot of fun to give them things with little hand drawn marks on them saying I died here, trapped here, this place smells weird.
I did think that was a really cool idea of you taking the old maps and giving them like a very specific purpose in the new LOBs. I thought that was a really cool trick. We're coming up on the end of our time.
I think pretty much that's our hour, unless anybody else has a question. I was just like, I said darkly whimsical and immediately thought, oh my God, imagine early Tim Burton being unleashed on par length.
Horrible, but great.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Well,
you guys
thanks so much to everyone for joining us. Josh, Michael, this was a ton of fun.
Yep.
Well, I learned a lot.
Thanks for all the questions in the comments.
You guys are ready? I'm going to stop the recording. 3, 2.
Sounds great.